Marcus had always been the type of guy who knew exactly what he wanted. At 28, he worked as a marketing manager at a tech startup downtown, drove a decent car, and had his life mapped out in neat little boxes. He dated the same type of woman every time: tall, blonde, outgoing, the kind who turned heads when they walked into a room together. Sarah Chen was nothing like that. She started working at his company on a rainy Tuesday in March. Marcus barely looked up when their boss introduced her to the team. She was average height, with straight black hair that she kept in a simple ponytail, and she wore plain button-up shirts with dark slacks. Nothing flashy, nothing that demanded attention. She spoke quietly during meetings, took notes in a small notebook, and always seemed to fade into the background while others fought to be heard. The office buzzed with the usual gossip about new employees, but Sarah generated almost no interest. She wasn't particularly social, eating lunch alone while reading paperback novels, and she left exactly at 5:30 every day. Marcus filed her away in his mind as quiet Asian girl from accounting and promptly forgot about her existence. His attention was elsewhere anyway. Jessica from the sales team had caught his eye weeks ago. She was everything he typically went for: confident, laughing loudly at company happy hours, wearing designer clothes that hugged her curves just right. Marcus had been working up the courage to ask her out, timing his coffee breaks to coincide with hers, finding excuses to stop by her desk with questions about client accounts. "You should just ask her," his friend Tom said one evening over beers. "What's the worst that could happen?" Marcus knew Tom was right. He'd never had trouble getting dates before. Women usually responded well to his charm, his easy smile, his ability to make them laugh. Jessica would be no different. Meanwhile, Sarah quietly did her job. She arrived 15 minutes early every morning, her desk organized with mathematical precision. She handled the monthly budget reports that everyone else found tedious, catching errors that would have cost the company thousands. When the coffee machine broke down, she fixed it without telling anyone. When Marcus's computer crashed during an important presentation, she appeared at his elbow like a shadow, quickly backing up his files and getting him running again within minutes. "Thanks," he mumbled. Not really looking at her, his focus already back on impressing the clients in the conference room. "No problem," she said softly, and disappeared back to her desk. This became the pattern. Sarah solved problems quietly, efficiently, without fanfare. She stayed late to finish projects when others had already left for happy hour. She brought homemade cookies for the office break room and never mentioned they were from her. She remembered everyone's birthdays, even though most people couldn't remember hers. Marcus noticed none of this. His world revolved around himself, his career ambitions, and his pursuit of Jessica. He saw Sarah only as part of the office furniture, useful when needed, invisible otherwise. The first crack in his awareness came during the quarterly company retreat. Everyone piled into buses headed to a resort an hour outside the city for team-building exercises and presentations. Marcus made sure to sit near Jessica, spending the ride trying to make her laugh with stories about difficult clients and office politics. Sarah sat 3 rows behind them, quietly listening to music through small earbuds, watching the countryside roll past the window. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, looking younger than her 26 years. Her hair was down for once, falling in soft waves around her shoulders, but Marcus was too busy performing for Jessica to notice. The retreat activities were typical corporate nonsense: trust falls, problem-solving exercises, icebreaker games designed to make everyone uncomfortable. Marcus excelled at these things, his natural charisma making him a team leader in every activity. Jessica laughed at his jokes and playfully punched his arm when he teased her. Things were going exactly as he'd hoped. Sarah participated quietly in the background, contributing solid ideas that helped her team succeed, but never pushing herself forward for recognition. During the trust fall exercise, Marcus watched her catch a much larger coworker without hesitation, her small frame somehow steady enough to support him. She smiled, actually smiled. When the exercise worked perfectly, and for just a moment, Marcus caught a glimpse of something different in her face. But then Jessica called his name, and the moment passed. That evening, there was a company barbecue by the resort's lake. Marcus positioned himself near the bar where Jessica was getting a drink, ready to make his move. He'd been building up to this all day, dropping hints, making her laugh, establishing a connection. This was his moment. "Jessica, I was wondering if maybe you'd like to get dinner sometime," he said, flashing his most confident smile. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "That's sweet, Marcus, but I'm actually seeing someone. Have been for about 6 months now." The rejection hit him like a physical blow. 6 months? How had he missed that? He'd been so sure she was interested, so certain his usual approach would work. "Oh," he managed. "I didn't realize." "It's fine," she said kindly. "We've kept it pretty quiet since he works for a competing firm, but thanks for asking." Marcus nodded, his face burning with embarrassment. He mumbled something about understanding and walked away. His confidence shattered. He found himself wandering toward the lake, needing space to process what had just happened. The moon was full, casting silver light across the water. A few co-workers sat around a small bonfire further down the shore, their laughter carrying on the night air. Marcus chose a spot away from them, sitting on a fallen log and staring out at the dark water. He wasn't alone for long. Soft footsteps approached, and he looked up to see Sarah walking toward him, carrying 2 bottles of beer. "Thought you might want one," she said simply, offering him a bottle. He took it gratefully, surprised by the gesture. "Thanks. How did you know I was out here?" "Saw you leave the barbecue. You looked like you needed some air." They sat in silence for a while, drinking their beers and listening to the gentle lap of water against the shore. Marcus found himself stealing glances at Sarah in the moonlight. Her profile was delicate, almost artistic, with high cheekbones and a small, straight nose. When had he ever really looked at her before? "Jessica turned you down," Sarah said quietly. It wasn't a question. Marcus winced. Was it that obvious? Only to someone who was watching. She took a sip of her beer. "She's been dating Richard from Morrison Tech since last fall. They're pretty serious." "How do you know that?" "People talk. I listen." She glanced at him sideways. "You've been trying to ask her out for weeks. Everyone in the office knew." Marcus felt his face heat up again. "Great. So I'm the office joke now." "You're not a joke," Sarah said firmly. "You just set your sights on someone who was already taken. Happens to everyone." There was something in her tone that made him look at her more carefully. In the moonlight, her eyes seemed larger, more expressive than he'd ever noticed. She wasn't conventionally beautiful like Jessica, but there was something quietly attractive about her features, something peaceful and genuine. "What about you?" he asked impulsively. "Are you seeing anyone?" Sarah smiled, but there was something sad in it. "No, I don't really date much." "Why not?" She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Hard to compete with the Jessicas of the world, I guess." Something in those words hit Marcus unexpectedly hard. He looked at Sarah, really looked at her, sitting there in the moonlight, offering him comfort after his rejection, and felt something shift inside his chest. But before he could examine the feeling too closely, voices from the bonfire grew louder and the moment passed. They finished their beers in comfortable silence, then walked back to the resort together. At the elevator, Sarah said goodnight and disappeared into her room, leaving Marcus standing in the hallway with a strange, unsettled feeling he couldn't quite name. That night, he lay in bed thinking not about Jessica's rejection, but about the quiet kindness of the woman who'd found him by the lake. For the first time since Sarah had started working at their company, Marcus found himself genuinely curious about who she really was. The Monday after the company retreat, Marcus found himself paying attention to Sarah for the first time. He noticed how she always arrived early, how she organized her workspace with careful precision, how she moved through the office with quiet efficiency. When she passed his desk, he caught a hint of her perfume, something light and floral, completely different from the heavy, expensive scents Jessica favored. "Morning, Sarah," he said when she walked by with a stack of reports. She looked surprised at being directly addressed. "Good morning, Marcus. How was your weekend?" "Fine, thanks." "Quiet." She shifted the papers in her arms. "How was yours?" "Good. Just caught up on some reading." This was a lie. He'd spent most of the weekend thinking about their conversation by the lake, trying to understand the strange pull he felt toward her now. Sarah nodded politely and continued to her desk, but Marcus caught her glancing back at him once, a small furrow between her eyebrows as if she was trying to solve a puzzle. Over the next few weeks, Marcus made an effort to really see Sarah. He discovered she brought lunch from home every day, carefully packed meals in glass containers that always looked delicious. She kept a small succulent plant on her desk that she watered precisely every Tuesday. She wore different earrings every day, small and understated, but he began to notice the tiny variations: silver hoops, small pearls, delicate flowers. During meetings, he found himself watching her instead of trying to impress the room. Sarah had a way of listening that was completely focused, her dark eyes serious and thoughtful. When she did speak, her ideas were always practical and well-considered. She never fought for airtime like the others, but when she offered an opinion, people listened. "You know," Tom said one day over lunch, "you've been different lately, less intense about work stuff." "Have I?" Marcus stirred his soup absently, thinking about how Sarah had quietly fixed the printer that morning while everyone else just complained about it being broken. "Yeah. And you haven't mentioned Jessica in weeks. I thought you were all hung up on her." Marcus shrugged. "That didn't work out." "So what's next?" "There's that new girl in HR who's been asking about you." But Marcus found he had no interest in the new girl in HR or anyone else who might fit his old pattern. Something had shifted in him, and he wasn't entirely sure what to do about it. His opportunity came when the company announced they were redecorating the main conference room and needed volunteers for a selection committee. Marcus signed up immediately when he saw Sarah's name on the list. Maybe working on a project together would give him a chance to get to know her better. The committee met after work hours, which meant the office was mostly empty except for the 3 volunteers and their supervisor. Marcus had hoped for more time alone with Sarah, but the third committee member was David Chen from IT. No relation to Sarah, despite the shared surname, as Marcus learned during their first meeting. David was everything Marcus wasn't: tall, quiet, serious, with thick-rimmed glasses and an easy way with technology that made him invaluable to the company. He was also, Marcus noticed with growing discomfort, exactly the type of person Sarah seemed to connect with. During their meetings, Marcus watched David and Sarah work together on laptop presentations, their heads bent close over the screen, talking in low voices about color schemes and furniture layouts. David made Sarah laugh, actually laugh, not just the polite smile she gave most people. Her whole face lit up when he cracked a dry joke about ergonomic office chairs, and Marcus felt something dark and uncomfortable twist in his chest. "What do you think, Marcus?" Sarah asked during their third meeting, looking up from a catalog of conference tables. He'd been so focused on watching her interaction with David that he'd completely missed the conversation. "Sorry, what was the question? Glass top or wood finish for the main table?" "Whatever you think is best," he said, earning a puzzled look from both Sarah and David. Marcus had never experienced jealousy like this before. In his previous relationships, he'd always been the pursued one, confident in his appeal, secure in his position. Watching Sarah's easy rapport with David made him feel like he was losing something he'd never actually had. The worst part was that David was genuinely a good guy. He was thoughtful, funny in an understated way, and clearly brilliant at his job. When Sarah mentioned being frustrated with her ancient laptop, David stayed after their meeting to help her troubleshoot, patiently walking her through software updates and optimization tricks. Marcus made excuses to hang around, ostensibly organizing papers, but really watching David's careful attention to Sarah's needs. "There," David said finally, as Sarah's laptop ran noticeably faster. "That should help with the lag issues." "You're amazing," Sarah said warmly. "I've been dealing with that for months. How did you know what to do?" "Just part of the job," David replied, but he looked pleased by her gratitude. Marcus felt like he was watching his chance slip away before he'd even had it. Sarah and David clearly had a connection built on shared interests and compatible personalities. Marcus couldn't compete with David's genuine expertise or his natural kindness. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt inadequate. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. Marcus was working late, trying to finish a presentation for the next day's client meeting, when he heard voices from the conference room. Through the glass walls, he could see Sarah and David setting up chairs and testing the new audio-visual equipment they'd selected. "I think the projector's aligned now," David said, adjusting something on the ceiling-mounted device. "Perfect. The client presentation tomorrow should go smoothly." Sarah stepped back to admire their work, and Marcus noticed she was wearing a dress instead of her usual blouses and slacks. A simple navy blue dress that somehow made her look both professional and softly feminine. "Want to grab dinner to celebrate finishing the project?" David asked, casually. "There's a new Thai place around the corner that's supposed to be good." Marcus held his breath, his hands frozen over his keyboard. Sarah smiled. That genuine, warm smile Marcus was beginning to realize she reserved for very few people. "I'd love that." They gathered their things and headed toward the elevator, talking about the restaurant and what they might order. Marcus watched them through his office window, Sarah's laugh carrying faintly through the glass as David said something amusing about the perils of spicy food. The elevator doors closed, and Marcus was alone in the office with a feeling he'd never experienced before. It wasn't just jealousy. It was the devastating realization that he'd wasted weeks focusing on the wrong person. And now, someone else had seen Sarah's value before he had. He tried to go back to his presentation, but the words blurred on the screen. All he could think about was Sarah's face when she'd accepted David's invitation, the easy way they moved together, how natural their connection seemed. Marcus had always gotten what he wanted through charm and persistence, but this felt different. This felt like he was already too late. For the first time, Marcus understood what it meant to want something he couldn't have. Sarah wasn't a conquest or a challenge to be won. She was a person with her own preferences, her own life, her own choices. And she was choosing David. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the office early, hoping to catch Sarah before the day got busy. She was already at her desk, reviewing notes for the client presentation. She looked up when he approached, offering her usual polite smile. "Morning, Marcus. Ready for the big presentation?" "Yeah, about that." He sat on the edge of her desk, trying for casual. "I wanted to thank you for all the work you did on the conference room." "It looks great." "David did most of the technical setup," Sarah said. "I just picked out furniture." "Right, David." Marcus tried to keep his voice neutral. "You two seem to work well together." Something flickered in Sarah's expression. "We do. He's very reliable." "Did you enjoy dinner last night?" Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly. "How did you know about that?" Marcus felt heat creep up his neck. "I saw you leaving together. Just wondered if the Thai place was any good." "It was nice." Sarah's tone was carefully neutral now, and Marcus realized he'd revealed too much. "Marcus, is there something specific you needed? The presentation starts in an hour." "No, nothing specific." He stood up, feeling foolish. "Just making conversation." But as he walked back to his desk, Marcus caught Sarah watching him with a thoughtful expression. For just a moment, he wondered if she was beginning to understand what he was only now figuring out himself. The client presentation went perfectly. The new conference room impressed everyone, and Sarah received praise from their boss for her attention to detail in the renovations. Marcus watched her accept the compliments with quiet grace and felt a surge of pride mixed with regret. She deserved recognition for all the invisible work she did, but he'd been too blind to see it until now. After the clients left, the team gathered for celebratory drinks at the bar across the street. Marcus positioned himself near Sarah, hoping for a chance to really talk to her, but David appeared at her side almost immediately. "The presentation went great," David said, offering Sarah a drink. "You should be proud." "We should both be proud," Sarah corrected. "The AV system worked flawlessly." Marcus watched them talk, noting the easy way Sarah relaxed around David, how she leaned in when he spoke, how she touched his arm lightly when she laughed. Everything Marcus had been hoping to build with her was already there between Sarah and David, natural and effortless. "You're staring," Tom said, appearing beside Marcus with 2 beers. "I'm not staring. You're definitely staring, and you look like someone stole your lunch money." Marcus accepted the beer gratefully. "It's complicated." "The quiet girl from accounting?" Tom followed Marcus's gaze to where Sarah and David stood by the window. "Since when are you interested in her type?" "Since I realized I've been an idiot." Tom studied Marcus's face with growing understanding. "Oh, man. You're actually into her. Like, really into her." "It doesn't matter," Marcus said, watching David say something that made Sarah laugh. "I think that ship has sailed." But even as he said it, Marcus felt something harden into determination inside his chest. He'd never fought for anything he really wanted before because things had always come easily to him. Maybe it was time to learn how to try. Marcus spent the weekend creating a plan. For the first time in his life, he couldn't rely on his natural charm or assume success was guaranteed. Sarah wasn't Jessica. She wouldn't be impressed by flashy gestures or smooth lines. If he wanted her attention, he needed to prove he'd actually seen her, understood what mattered to her. Monday morning, he arrived at the office with a small potted orchid. He'd researched her favorite flowers by casually asking around, learning from Linda in reception that Sarah had once mentioned loving orchids but thinking they were too expensive to buy for herself. The plant wasn't flashy, a simple white bloom in a modest ceramic pot, but it was thoughtful. "This is for you," he said, placing it carefully on Sarah's desk before she arrived. When Sarah got to work and found the orchid, she looked around the office with confusion. Marcus watched from his desk as she examined the small card he'd attached. "Thank you for all the invisible work you do. It doesn't go unnoticed anymore. Marcus." Sarah's eyes found his across the office, her expression unreadable. She mouthed "thank you" and touched the orchid's petals gently, but her smile seemed uncertain. Over the following days, Marcus made his interest clear in small, consistent ways. He brought her coffee exactly as she liked it. He'd paid attention to her order during office coffee runs. He stayed late to help with projects, not hovering or trying to take over, but offering genuine assistance. When Sarah worked through lunch on quarterly reports, he quietly ordered her favorite sandwich from the deli and left it on her desk without fanfare. "You don't have to do this," Sarah said one evening as they were both working late. The office was nearly empty, just the two of them and the soft glow of desk lamps. "Do what?" "Whatever this is." She gestured between them. "The flowers, the coffee, staying late." I don't need to be managed or handled, Marcus. Her directness surprised him. I'm not trying to manage you. Then what are you trying to do? Marcus saved his work and turned to face her fully. I'm trying to show you that I see you. Really see you, not just as background office furniture. Sarah's expression softened slightly, but there was still wariness in her eyes. Why now? What changed? It was a fair question, one Marcus had been asking himself. I think I was so focused on what I thought I wanted that I missed what was right in front of me. You've been incredible this whole time, and I was too blind to notice. And what brought on this sudden clarity? Marcus hesitated. The truth was complicated, tied up in his jealousy over David and his bruised ego from Jessica's rejection. But looking at Sarah's intelligent eyes, he knew she deserved honesty. Watching you with David, he admitted, seeing how you lit up around him, how natural you were together. It made me realize I'd never seen you really smile before, and it was my loss. Something flickered across Sarah's face. David's a good friend. Just a friend? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus's face. Would it matter if he was more than that? The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. Yes, he said quietly. It would matter a lot. Why? A month ago, you couldn't even remember my name half the time. That's not true. Isn't it? Marcus, you spent weeks chasing Jessica while I was right here. You never looked at me twice until David started paying attention. How am I supposed to believe this isn't just some competitive thing for you? Her words stung because they contained enough truth to hurt. Marcus had been competitive his whole life, always wanting what seemed just out of reach. But this felt different, deeper than simple rivalry. You're right, he said finally. I was an idiot about Jessica, and seeing you with David did wake me up. But that's not why I'm here now. Then why are you here? Because you found me by the lake that night and didn't make me feel pathetic for being rejected. Because you fix things quietly without needing credit. Because you remember everyone's birthday and you water that little plant on your desk every Tuesday and you wear different earrings every day that nobody else notices. Marcus's voice grew quieter as he spoke. Because when you really smile, not the polite office smile, but the real one, it changes your whole face. Sarah's expression had grown very still as he talked. Marcus. I know I don't deserve a chance, he continued. I know I ignored you for months and only started paying attention when I thought someone else might take you away. But I'm asking anyway, because I think we could be something good together if you'd let me try. Before Sarah could respond, the elevator dinged, and David's voice echoed across the office. Sarah, you're still here? Marcus felt his heart sink as David approached, carrying takeout bags and wearing a concerned smile. I brought dinner, David said, glancing between Marcus and Sarah. You mentioned you'd be working late, so I thought you might be hungry. That's very thoughtful, Sarah said, but her eyes remained on Marcus. David, this is Marcus. Marcus. David. The two men shook hands with polite tension. Marcus could see why Sarah connected with David. He was genuinely kind, thoughtful in ways that came naturally rather than requiring effort. Everything Marcus was trying to become, David already was. I should go, Marcus said, starting to gather his things. Wait, Sarah said suddenly. She looked between the two men, something resolving in her expression. David, thank you for the dinner. That was really sweet. But I need to finish this conversation with Marcus. David glanced between them, understanding dawning. Of course. I'll just leave the food at your desk. Chinese food reheats well. After David left, the office felt impossibly quiet. Sarah stood up from her chair, walking to the window that overlooked the city lights. David asked me out last Friday, she said without turning around. Marcus felt the words like a punch to the gut. What did you tell him? I told him I needed to think about it. She turned to face Marcus. "Do you know why?" Marcus shook his head, not trusting his voice. "Because even though David is everything that makes sense, kind, reliable, interested in me for all the right reasons, I couldn't stop thinking about you." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. "I've had a crush on you since my second week here," Sarah continued, her voice steady but quiet. "I watched you chase Jessica, watched you charm everyone in the office, and I knew I wasn't your type. I made peace with that. I decided to be content being invisible. Sarah. But then you started paying attention. And it scared me, because I don't want to be your consolation prize, Marcus. I don't want to be the safe choice you settle for when the exciting options don't work out. You're not a consolation prize." Marcus moved closer, close enough to see the uncertainty in her dark eyes. "You're the prize. You're the person I should have been trying to win all along. How do I know that? How do I know you won't lose interest when the next Jessica comes along?" It was the right question, the one that got to the heart of everything. Marcus had always been drawn to the next shiny thing, always convinced that what he wanted was just around the corner. But looking at Sarah now, really looking at her, taking in the intelligence in her eyes and the quiet strength in the way she held herself, he felt something settle in his chest that he'd never experienced before. "Because I've never felt like this about anyone," he said honestly. "With Jessica, with all the others, I was performing, trying to be the version of myself I thought they wanted. With you, I don't want to perform. I want to be real." Sarah studied his face for a long moment. "This is terrifying for me, Marcus. I've never been the girl guys notice. I don't know how to do this." "We'll figure it out together." Marcus reached for her hand, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he threaded their fingers together. "I know I don't have the best track record, but I want to try. I want to learn how to be the kind of person who deserves you." "And David?" Marcus's chest tightened. "What about David?" "He's a good man. He'd treat me well." Yes, he would. The admission cost Marcus something, but it was true. "If you choose him, I'll respect that. But I hope you'll choose me." Sarah was quiet for so long that Marcus began to think he'd lost her. Then she squeezed his hand gently. "I need to be honest with David first. It's not fair to keep him waiting for an answer when I already know what it is." Hope bloomed in Marcus's chest. "What is it?" Sarah smiled. Not the polite office smile, but the real one that had captivated him from across the bar that night. "I want to try too, but we go slow, okay? Real slow. I need to trust that this isn't just about wanting what you can't have." "As slow as you want," Marcus promised. "I'm not going anywhere." 6 months later, Marcus understood why he'd never been able to make relationships work before. He'd been trying to fit people into the shape of what he thought he wanted, instead of discovering what actually made him happy. With Sarah, everything was different. She challenged him to be better, called him out when he slipped into old patterns, celebrated his successes without needing them to reflect on her. They'd started with coffee dates, then progressed to long walks around the city where Sarah showed him hidden bookstores and tiny gardens he'd never noticed. She taught him to slow down, to pay attention to details, to find satisfaction in quiet moments rather than constant achievement. David had handled Sarah's gentle rejection with characteristic grace, even congratulating Marcus when their relationship became office knowledge. "You'd better treat her right," he'd said simply, and Marcus had promised he would. Now, watching Sarah water her desk plant on a Tuesday morning, Marcus marveled at how wrong he'd been about everything. He'd spent years chasing women who fit a certain image, while the right person sat 3 desks away, solving problems and making everything around her a little bit better. Sarah caught him staring and raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Just thinking about how lucky I am." "Sap," she said, but she was smiling as she said it. and Marcus knew he'd finally found what he'd been looking for all along. Sometimes the best things in life were the ones you never saw coming until jealousy opened your eyes to what was already there.